If you're looking for the exact moment the British Empire really lost its superpower status, you're not looking at a treaty.
No, you're looking at a man-made ditch in the middle of a desert.
We are talking about the Suez Canal crisis of 1956.
Yeah.
It was, and this isn't an exaggeration, probably the single most important turning point in global politics after the war.
It really is. It's a story about one man, a gigantic dam, and a financial showdown that basically brought two of the world-old empires to their knees.
And for you listening, understanding, this isn't just about geography.
No, it's about understanding how power shifted, how it moved from those old colonial powers like Britain and France to the new superpowers.
The U.S. and the Soviet Union.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with the geography. The Suez Canal. What is it, and why did it cause such a huge problem?
Well, it's a man-made waterway in Egypt, and it connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea.
Which sounds simple, but it's a world-changing shortcut.
It's the shortcut that changed the world, yeah. Before it was built in 1869, if you were in a ship going from, say, London to India,
You had to go the long way around.
the very long way, all the way around the entire continent of Africa, the canal just cut straight through, saving thousands of miles and weeks of travel time.
And by the 1950s, it wasn't just about trade goods anymore. It was about one thing in particular.
Oil. Black gold. It was the main route for shipping petroleum from the Middle East to Western Europe. For countries like Britain and France, it was their economic lifeline.
A lifeline is the perfect word.
It was. If that canal shut down, factories in Europe would grind to a halt, people's homes would go cold. Controlling that tiny strip of water meant you basically controlled Europe's energy supply.
Okay, so that's the prize. Let's introduce the man who decided he was going to take it. Gamal Abdel Nasser.
Right. Nasser was a military officer who came to power in Egypt in the early 50s, and he had a vision, a really big one.
He wanted to modernize Egypt,
Right.
make it truly independent.
Completely independent, especially from the British, who had, sort of hung around with troops and influence for decades. Nasser became this huge symbol of pride for the whole Arab world.
And that drive to modernize led him to a massive project, the Aswan High Dam.
This wasn't just some dam. It was a nation-building project. It was designed to control the Nile's flooding, create electricity for new industries. It was Egypt's future.
But a project that big needs a ton of money.
Billions in today's terms, money that Egypt just did not have. So Nasser had to go looking for investors.
And at first he looked to the West, the U.S. and Britain.
He did. But you have to remember the context. This is the peak of the Cold War.
Right, so everything is about picking a side. Are you with the U.S. or the Soviet Union?
And Nasser didn't want to pick a side. He was trying to walk this tightrope of non-alignment. He wanted Western money, but he also started building relationships with communist countries.
And that made Washington and London very, very nervous.
It did. And then in 1955, Nasser made a big move. He bought a large amount of weapons from Czechoslovakia, which was a Soviet bloc country.
Okay, so for the U.S., that was a huge red flag.
That was the step too far. They saw him pivoting toward the Soviets, and they decided to punish him for it.
So what did they do?
In July of 1956, the U.S. and Britain just pulled their offer to fund the Aswan Dam.
Wow, just like that.
Just like that. And they did it in a very public, very humiliating way. They thought they could starve him of cash, force him to come crawling back.
But they completely misjudged him.
Completely. Nasser's response was immediate, and it was historic. He went before a massive crowd and announced that Egypt was going to nationalize the Suez Canal Company.
Let's break that down. Nationalize, what did that actually mean in this case?
It meant the Egyptian government was taking it over, seizing control and ownership of the entire canal operation, effective immediately.
And the company that owned it wasn't Egyptian.
Not at all. It was overwhelmingly owned by French and British investors who had been making enormous profits from the canal tolls for decades.
So Nasser's argument was that the money from this Egyptian waterway should go to the Egyptian people.
Exactly. He said that money would pay for the Aswan Dam. In Egypt, people were celebrating in the streets. But in London and Paris,
Pure
fury is putting it mildly. To them, this was theft. It was a direct threat to their economies. They were terrified Nasser would block their oil ships or just charge them insane prices.
So that fury pretty quickly turned into a plan, a military one.
Oh, yeah. They decided diplomacy was over. The only way to get the canal back and get rid of Nasser was by force.
And this leads to one of the most deceptive secret agreements of the entire Cold War.
The Protocol of Sèvres. It was a secret meeting between Britain, France, and Israel, and what they planned was basically a conspiracy.
Let's walk through the plan, because the secrecy is so important to what happens next.
It's a three-step plan. Step 1. Israel would attack Egypt across the Sinai Peninsula,
Okay, creating a war.
creating the impression of a dangerous regional war right next to the canal. Step 2. Britain and France would then publicly demand that both sides stop fighting.
Ah, so they could pretend to be the peacekeepers.
Exactly. They would step in to separate the combatants and protect the canal. And step 3, with their troops on the ground, they'd seize the canal zone and they hoped get rid of Nasser in the process.
And they kept all of this hidden from their main ally, the United States.
They absolutely had to. They knew if President Eisenhower found out, he would shut it down immediately.
So, on October 29th, 1956, the plan goes into motion.
It does. The Israeli military launches a surprise attack and moves very quickly across the Sinai, heading for the canal.
Egypt, of course, has to move its army to defend its own territory.
Right. And just as planned, Britain and France then issue their ultimatum. They demand both Egypt and Israel withdraw their forces 10 miles from the canal.
A demand Egypt could never accept. They were being invaded.
Of course. So Nasser refuses. And that was the green light, the justification they needed.
And the attack begins.
Anglo-French bombers start hitting Egyptian airfields, destroying most of Nasser's air force before it can even get off the ground. Then, paratroopers are dropped near the canal cities to seize control.
And their public reason was to protect shipping.
But everyone knew the real goal was to take back the canal and overthrow Nasser. It was old-school colonial gunboat diplomacy.
But this is where the whole thing just spectacularly falls apart on them.
It really does. The international reaction was not what they expected. It was fast, and it was overwhelmingly negative.
The UN holds emergency meetings demanding a ceasefire. But the real shock comes from the two superpowers.
Right. For once, the United States and the Soviet Union were on the same side.
They both condemned the invasion.
They did. President Eisenhower in the U.S. was furious. First, because his allies lied to him. But second, and more importantly, he was terrified. This kind of old-world imperialism would push the entire Arab world into the arms of the Soviets.
And the Soviets saw a golden opportunity.
A massive one. They started making threats. They actually threatened to fire nuclear rockets at London and Paris if the invasion didn't stop.
Which is terrifying. But the weapon that actually worked wasn't a rocket. It was money.
It was the U.S. economy. This is really where you see the New World Order being born. Eisenhower decided to use America's financial power as a weapon against his own allies.
How did he do that?
Well, Britain's economy was still very fragile after World War II. The U.S. threatened to sell off its massive holdings of the British currency, the pound sterling.
What would that have done?
It would have caused the value of the pound to completely collapse. It would have bankrupted the country in a matter of days. Britain was facing a total financial meltdown orchestrated by its closest ally.
So America's economic threat was more powerful than Britain's military.
Far more powerful. It was a brutal wake-up call. The age of European empires being able to do whatever they wanted was over.
So under that immense pressure, Britain had no choice.
None. The Prime Minister, Anthony Eden, his career now totally destroyed, gave in. A ceasefire was declared on November 6th. It was a complete and utter failure for Britain and France.
But the troops were still in Egypt. So what happened then?
This is where the UN steps in with a brand new idea. They create something called the United Nations Emergency Force, or UNEF.
Peacekeepers.
The world's first armed international peacekeeping force. Their job was to go in, supervise the withdrawal, and just keep the two sides apart. It set the model for every UN peacekeeping mission since.
And eventually, all the foreign troops did leave.
By early 1957, they were all gone. Britain and France had failed. They didn't get the canal, and Nasser was more powerful than ever.
And the canal itself, what happened during the fighting?
Well, during the invasion, the Egyptians deliberately sank about 40 ships inside the canal, blocking it completely.
So it was unusable.
Totally. For almost 6 months, this caused huge oil shortages in Europe. Ships had to go back to the long route around Africa. It was an economic disaster.
But when it finally reopened...
When it reopened in April 1957, it was under full, efficient Egyptian management. Nasser had won.
The political fallout was just immense. For Britain, this was the end of an era.
It was the moment they ceased to be a top-tier world power. Prime Minister Eden resigned in disgrace. British foreign policy had to be completely rethought. From that point on, they would never act without U.S. approval.
And for Nasser.
He became a hero of epic proportions across the Middle East, Africa, Asia, anywhere that was fighting colonialism. He had stood up to 2 major European powers and won. It inspired independence movements everywhere.
And it changed the Cold War.
Massively. The Soviet Union, by backing Egypt, gained huge influence in the Arab world, something they never had before.
So when you look back, the big lesson from 1956 is that the old ways of doing things just didn't work anymore.
Not at all. It showed the limits of military force. It proved that economic power and, international diplomacy through things like the UN were the new, more powerful tools.
The events of 1956 really proved that a country's power wasn't just about its army anymore. It was about its position in the global financial system. And what happens when someone threatens to pull the plug on that is a lot scarier than tanks in the desert.
Absolutely. See you next time.